Well, that's an interesting question as well, because obviously there's a lot of experiments and a lot of tests going on, and you certainly must get hundreds, if not thousands, of pitches on social media. Hey, we're doing this. An agency is going to engage social media a different way this time.
Yeah.
How do you figure out, what's valuable, what's interesting to the readers of Adweek and to the industry?
Well, it's funny because I think, going back to this, a lot of the things that I find most interesting are examples of social media being used to solve a business problem. And I think it's a little different from some other publications like a Mashable or TechCrunch. Like, they're very hung up on like first to market, new, and then they move on to the next first and new. And it's not really tied to actually moving businesses forward, because the tough stuff happens after first and new. The tough stuff happens when you like sort of integrate it into your processes in order to actually help your business. And so that's what I'm most interested in, is just like simply like, here's a problem that a client had, here's how we use social media or outdoor or print or whatever in order to solve it. And this is ideally, and this is how this is what the results were. Like that's sort of what I'm most interested in.
One of the other buzzwords that's out there is transparency and authenticity. I think authenticity perhaps the most. You've spoken before about authenticity, that it can be taken too far and maybe even be disingenuous when you have marketing and advertising and authenticity sort of in the same sentence. There's a lot of debate right now about things like sponsored conversations and sponsored spokesbloggers, and I would love to have your point of view on where you think this area is going.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the biggest problem is when you talk about authenticity in marketing, is like you're talking about an oxymoron, really. I mean, because marketing is not an authentic conversation, I don't think. At least the way it's being practiced now. Okay. It's basically a company trying to get its message and its viewpoint across, and sometimes they're going to, sponsor conversations and things like that in order to get it in our stream of conversations. But I think the biggest problem is when, and you always hear like brands giving up control and stuff like this. The way it's done right now is, I see a lot of times like companies really want to keep that control over. They're great to have a conversation as long as the conversation is about what they want it to be. And that's why it's really not authentic.
Interesting. Yeah. So you're also a con veteran. You've been here for several years. What do you see has changed in the last few years, and what do you want to get out of this year's festival?
I guess what's changed with the festival itself is, it's grown a lot more, like in a lot of categories, and I think a lot of that is simply just the business model of the Cannes organizers: more categories, more entries, more money. But I think it's also a reflection of all of this stuff is bleeding into each other. I think one of the most awarded campaigns this year will be something like Gatorade's Replay, and that can go across 4 or 5 different categories. I mean, like Nike Chalkbot, that can be part of 2 or 3 different ones. And because everything's going in more of an integrated direction, I don't think the award shows themselves have kept up with that, because they're kind of stuck in a world where it was all about an object. Okay, this is a TV commercial, this is a print ad. Whereas now we're talking about systems in which these objects are all linked together and they play off each other. Right. So I think that's the biggest problem is moving from objects to systems.
Which makes the ROI calculation all the more difficult, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because which part of the system is producing the most effect, and which can you cut out? How do you prioritize the budget?
Yeah.
And in that vein, do you think spending in social is in line with the value that's coming out of it? I mean, we're talking about how social can inform a variety of aspects of the business.
Yeah.
And companies, PR companies like ours are involved in trying to get some of the data that's coming out of social to the right areas so that it can help with business decisions in marketing, in customer service, in business outcomes, in product development.
Yeah.
How do we make that case better? Or does the industry need to make the case better that data is valuable and should be used?
Yeah.
And should be invested in?
Well, I think as like the analytics tools get better. I mean, this is really, really new. I mean, for a lot of clients, and everyone always, like anyone with like an internet business always comes in with that chart that shows like amount of time spent versus the amount of money going into digital advertising, and there's always this delta between the two, and they act as if it was like a decree from God that the two should completely match up, and it's not really the case. But I think the same problem is going on with social. I mean, it's a new thing, and is there as much money going in there as there should be? Probably not, but I think a lot of that is just, it's going to take time.
Yeah.
And I think as the tools for analyzing the effects, like you were saying, get better, I think then the case will can really be made of saying, hey, let's take money out of these things and move it into these things. I'm already seeing people move out of paid media into earned media a lot. I think that's a shift that a lot of people are missing. I mean, maybe it's not as big, I guess, that they're seeing it, but I mean, you look at the stuff Pepsi's doing and Nike, and I mean, I think Trevor Edwards said, many years ago, we're not in the business of subsidizing media companies. If they can create their own media, or if they can, get earned media, they'd much rather do that than buy commercials. So it'll happen.
And on that note, are there any other trends that you're seeing early in Cannes that you'd like to share?
Well, I think sharing is a big one. Not to play off that, but I'm hearing more and more and more people talking about creating things that advertise rather than advertising things. And that's, you can do that in many ways. You can create a utility, or you can create a great piece of entertainment. I mean, you look at like Wyden and Kennedy's spot for Nike, Right the Future. They created they created a thing worth advertising, rather than just advertising, some Nike World Cup. So I think that's a big trend. And, because of social media increasing our abilities to share with each other.
All right. Well, thank you very much. We've been very, very happy to have you here. And that wraps up this session of Conversations at Cannes with our guest today, Brian Morrissey, the digital editor of Ad Week. We will see you again soon. Thank you very much, Brian.
Thanks.
Thank you.